Hey, in tonight's episode, we're going to talk about the only 3 times a diagnosis is needed or useful. Good evening, Facebook family. Welcome to another episode of Post Daily Dose with me, your trusted parenting advisor, faithful guide and servant on the healing journey. What's my name? Big Papa Bryan+Post. I hope everyone has had a fantastic day. It's been a day of grinding, just busy. I had an opportunity to do a fantastic training to a group in Canada, in Calgary, Canada, an FASD group, a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Really enjoyed spending that time with them, and that actually motivated me and inspired me to do this title tonight. Even though I know we're supposed to be talking about the stress model, we will get back to that. But I wanted to talk to you because it's so often parents get tied up and just focused on the diagnosis. And I know you do that because the mental health professionals do it. Hey, Heidi, good afternoon. The mental health professionals do it, and therefore, hey, Peggy, hey, Sylvia, and they guide your knowledge, their education. The teachers encourage it. You know, the psychiatrists do it. And listen to my Facebook Live I did, a few months back on differential diagnosis and medication. I think it's going to be really informative and helpful for most of you, for all of you, actually. But there are really only 3 times that a diagnosis is useful and or needed. And otherwise, I feel like a diagnosis does nothing more than scapegoats the child as the problem, as the point of problems in the family. And I really believe that when we do that, I believe that mental health professionals, educators, all the adults around the child look at the child as having the label, then ultimately looking at the child as having the problem. And then as soon as we do that, it removes us from any unconscious and conscious sense of responsibility. And in reality, it's always the exact inverse. We are always 100% responsible for our children because we are charged with their care. It is our responsibility to train them and to guide them up. And that doesn't mean that when they screw up that we're to be blamed or that you're to be blamed as a parent, but you have a responsibility in the raising and the parenting of your child. It doesn't get any more complicated than that. I mean, I feel like I have a responsibility to you to share with you, the most solid, research-based, evidence-based, experience-based practice that I've come across in the last 20 years. And if something were to change for me professionally, I have a moral obligation to come and share that with you guys. And I've actually been practicing therapy for even longer than 20 years. And in that earlier time, there were families that I went back to once I learned a different way, a different approach. And I apologized and told them that I felt like I had led them astray and I wanted to introduce them to this new concept. I feel like that's my moral obligation. Just like it is my moral obligation to my own children. I am their parent. And so anytime they need guidance or support from me, I'm there to provide it. And that doesn't mean that they always take it. But if one of my children were to go out and hurt another individual, I ultimately have responsibility in that. And it doesn't mean that it's my fault or that I'm to blame, but I do have a responsibility that I showed up in some way in my child's life that an imprint did not carry forward for them to help guide and inspire them in different directions. So that's what I mean by that. So Heidi, you're already jumping ahead, and hey Jill, and hey Debbie. So here's the without any more further ado and without my rambling. But before I do that, I did Big Papa morning meditations with Big Papa this morning. I don't even remember if that's what I called it. So be sure to check that out, and I might do that again tomorrow morning if people seem to really enjoy it. As long as I'm up and I'm getting up in my routine, my schedule, I'm happy to get up and share with you guys what's on my mind first thing in the morning. It's usually when my brain's really quiet and usually have some good things. So be looking for that early in the morning. Not that you have to be up with me, but usually I drive to the gym between 5 and 5:30. So I would be on sometime then Central Standard Time. So without further ado, Heidi nailed the first one. Number 1 reason for your child to ever have a diagnosis and to be given a label is for funding. That's number 1. Oftentimes, as adopted parents, as foster parents, you have to get funding for your child, and you are entitled to funding for your child. And if you are raising a traumatized child and you are not getting funding, then you need to go and advocate and ask for someone to advocate on your behalf, because you are federally entitled to that, to receive that. So you need to go to the supervisor. If you can't talk to your worker, if you can't talk to the supervisor, and really, even if you've adopted privately, you are still entitled to post-adoption funding. A good friend of mine, Lynn Smith from Washington State, was one of the first. Her case set precedence with her daughter in securing post-adoption funding. It is a federal mandate, so funds are available to you, and that is the only time, one of the only times, number one of three, that your child needs a diagnosis is in order for you to get funding. Number two is to get insurance to cover their therapy services or psychiatric services or residential treatment services or any of those other kind of services that they may need that insurance needs to pay for. So in those instances, you do what you got to do. You use that diagnosis, use it to benefit you, use it to benefit your child. Don't use it to be a hindrance or to be a barrier to their growth and to their movement and how you view them, but use it as an opportunity to help you get them the best possible care that you can when you're on that path. Now, I haven't billed insurance in 20 something odd years, maybe even more. So I have a lot of empathy for mental health professionals who still do, and I understand that it is necessary oftentimes for families to be able to do insurance, but I just kind of removed myself from that insurance game a long time ago. But if you've got a therapist who needs to bill insurance, who can bill insurance, who will bill insurance, by all means, you pay a lot of money for your insurance. So use it, maximize it, and request even more and get all the help that your family can possibly get. Now, I will say, I've done coaching with a family who's got a health savings account, and we are able to use health savings account at the Post+Institute to get you some coaching, to get you some additional services that you may be able to use, because they are medically related services. Counseling falls within that. So if you do have a health savings account and you find yourself needing some additional services, I would suggest that you reach out, hit Christy up at info@postinstitute.com, and she can give you some guidance in those areas. So, number one, funding. Number two, insurance. Number three, the number three reason why you need a diagnosis for your child is for individual education plans, IEPs in the school. Let me tell you guys something. If you have a child who's experienced trauma, they need to be on an IEP. Now, I'm a bit of a zealot when it comes to my thinking in that regard, kind of dogmatic, because I believe that any child who's experienced trauma can have adaptive measures to help them be even more successful. And it doesn't have to be something where there's this label and they're singled out amongst their classmates. But I could have used tutoring when I was in school. I could have used probably someone being aware that I was easily distractible in the classroom. I could have been aware. It would have been beneficial for me to have had a couple of services, just very subtle services. I don't feel like I needed a lot. I got through okay, but I know my sister for a fact could have used an IEP in school, and that's one of the reasons you get them. If your child has a diagnosis and they've experienced trauma, advocate for that IEP. It's individual education plan. Some children, some schools, it's a 504C, which is a little bit different than an IEP, but either way, they're both beneficial. But I really want to encourage you to, and Heidi said, if the school follows them, no, that's not acceptable. That is a federally mandated document. The school must follow the IEP. Now, this is where you as a parent have to get a little tough and your feathers have to, stick up in the air, and you just have to say, don't make me get an attorney. Because at the end of the day, not only do they have to follow the IEP, but they have to make sure you agree with it. So they cannot write an IEP without your signature that you agree with it. So don't just go along with something if you don't feel that it's going to be in the best interest of your child. If your child needs something additional, I really want to encourage you, advocate for them to get that, because that can make all the difference between your child's success and their failure. And not only that, but their willingness to go to school. See, some children, if they just feel too overwhelmed dealing with classrooms because we try to push everyone into the same class, we try to push them into the same seats, we try to push them into the same experience, then they get stressed and they're not able or interested in going to school because it's just too stressful. So an IEP can make all the difference between a child feeling like the school is a safe place versus feeling like it's a threatening place. And so advocate for that IEP. Do not relent on that. And one of the things I would really encourage you guys to do is have written into the IEP that homework does not come home. All homework gets done at the school. You can have that done. Have written in that IEP that your child gets to be assigned a mentor. Have written in that IEP that your child gets to call you if they start to hit a state of distress. They can call you from the school. Have written in that IEP that for a period of time you may actually call the school to check on your child. Have written into that IEP that you may come and have lunch in a private setting with your child. There are a lot of different things. Have written into that IEP that your child has the option to choose between recess and staying in the classroom if they feel like they need to regulate a little bit better. So there are lots of things that you can do. And really, the things I just rattled them off the top of my head. Now, granted, I've been consulting with schools and parents and teachers for a long time, but they're all things that are engineered to reduce stress. That's all they are. All you got to do is think about what's going on in my child's classroom, in my child's school that's so stressful. Cafeteria. Group activities, cafeteria, and recess are the single biggest, most stressful transition points in the life of a traumatized child. You can have written in the IEP different ways of transitioning for each one of those. As far as the group, maybe they only work with 1 to 2 other kids maximum. Keeps their regulation down. It keeps their regulation intact. It keeps them from getting too overwhelmed. In the cafeteria, you can have them sit in a certain place every single day, preferably close to the teacher's area where the teachers are prone to sit, or where the cafeteria monitor. I'm old, guys. I'm old. When I was growing up, the teachers used to sit at the head of the cafeteria, and they all sat there and they all ate lunch. Well, so I've got this concept in mind that still happens, but I remember when Marley was in school. I can't remember when Michaela was in school, but when Marley was in school, I don't think the teachers ever sat in the cafeteria and ate food. Mostly cafeteria monitor just stood around and yelled for the kids to be quiet, which is insane considering they've been quiet, been in school. But you can, in the IEP, you can have it written in that the child sits close to where the monitor is. In this instance, the one I just gave you, it'd be too a little stressful even sitting next to that person. But you get what I'm saying. You can advocate and have these things modified on recess. Again, you give your child the option of whether they go out to recess or not, and then you can have the school set up a specific area where that's their safe area. That's their safe zone. They don't play all over the recess, but they play in relationship to the monitor. So very important, very important. Tracy says, love that with homework too. No homework sent home. I swear I wish he had an IEP with older son. He has 3 hours of homework at night. That's absolutely ridiculous. There's no reason. I mean, just average normal development children shouldn't have 3. I don't think they should have any homework at all, to be honest with you. So that's kind of where I swing on the spectrum. And 3 hours is insane. That makes no sense whatsoever. I would really, really advocate for something different in that situation. And Jennifer says, phone calls are huge. The teacher would call and brag about our son while he was standing there. It was great. Fantastic. It's just an opportunity. Every touch you have with your child in the middle of the day, writing a note and put it in their lunchbox, will give you an opportunity to have a touch, right? If some cell phones do let your kids, some schools do let your kids take cell phones, so send them in a text in the middle of the day, just as simple. I love you. Hope you're having a great day. Look forward to seeing you this afternoon. Simple, straight to the point. And if they want to open up some kind of conversation, that's fantastic. But otherwise, it's just getting that point. Every time you get that touch point, it expands that window of tolerance. So that window of tolerance can be closing, and every time they get that touch point from you, it expands it. So that's another reason to have, that's number 3 reason to have a diagnosis. If you guys can think of a reason outside of those 3 that a diagnosis is going to be helpful. I know some parents might say, well, it helps me make sense of what's going on with my child. Yeah, I get that at some level, but I should be able to help you make sense of what's going on with your child without giving them a diagnosis. If I can't help you make sense, this is an important point. If I can't help you make sense of what's going on with your child without having to diagnose them and put them in a category, put them in a box, I'm probably not going to be able to help you in the care for them, in the treatment of them in any other way than inside the box. So I want you to think about that. If I have to give your child a diagnosis to help you understand your child, then my treatment of your child is probably going to be within that same box. And you guess what? That box, inside that box, is not where your child needs to be worked with. It's outside of that box. Because inside of that box is all of the therapy techniques and methods that happen pre-decade of the brain. The decade of the brain was the 90s. So that whole span, that 10-year period of time, a lot of mental health practices, a lot of our understanding of the brain, a lot of our understanding of trauma all changed. If your clinician was adept and they were passionate and they wanted to research and they did their homework, they did their studies, and they looked at themselves and did their own personal work, then their practice changed fundamentally after the decade of the brain. Anyone that's still relying on points and rewards and consequences and behavior modification and cognitive behavioral therapy, they're pre-decade of the brain and they don't get it. They just don't get it. Because once you get it, once you understand the decade of the brain, then your practice changes. The practice changes, and this is the thing. You can have a clinician who can talk a good game about what the brain does and what stress does and what trauma does, but their practice must match their explanations. If their practice doesn't match their explanations, then they really probably don't know what they're talking about. They're still just making up stuff. I hate to say it. All right, so last thing, Debbie says, my daughter transferred to the school where my husband teaches a school year. Oh, absolutely, because she feels safe. He's present. There's regulation that's ongoing. Tracy says, I hated for mine to have a diagnosis because I didn't want him to grow up and define himself as a diagnosis. I want him to grow outside the box, and he will with your guidance and support. So that's it. Remember, in any given situation, we can continue to diagnose our children, and we can continue to operate within that box, and we can continue to go along with people's recommendations that create more stress and more fear for our children and ultimately for us. But then that's just us living in fear, and that's a choice. That's a choice that we all have. We don't have to do anything different. You can keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. You really can. And that tells me that you're stressed, because in stress, you're thinking confused and distorted and your short-term memory is suppressed. Or you can stop, you can slow down, you can take 3 to 10 deep breaths, and you can choose love. And that's what I hope for each and every one of you, is that you will choose love. God bless you. Thank you for joining Big Papa tonight. I hope tonight when you lay your heads down and you close your eyes, that you just let all the worries drift away. There's no need to worry in your sleep. There is nothing you can do about the day that's going to come or the day that just passed. All you can do is have a peaceful night's sleep, and you can allow the cells of your body to relax. And my prayers for you is that they will relax, and it will release all the stress and all the fear and all the pain and all the trauma of not only of your lifetime, but the generations that passed. And when you wake up in the morning, you will feel restored, refreshed, re-energized, reinvigorated, and ready to conquer the next day. God bless each and every one of you. Big Papa loves you. We'll see you tomorrow.